Let's talk two-star pitchers and sleeper hitters for Week 22. Up next on Fantasy Baseball Today in 5. Welcome into FBT in 5 on Friday, August 18th. I am Frank Stanfield, joined by Scott White, and let's talk about the schedule for Week 22. 7 teams with 7 games next week. The Red Sox, Cubs, White Sox, Reds, Astros, A's, and Pirates. We have 22 teams with 6 games. 1 unlucky team with 5 games, the Milwaukee Brewers. And if you're wondering about the Rockies, they play 6 games, all of them on the road, unfortunately. Starters sit these two-star pitchers, and the Red Sox rotation is kind of in flux right now. I think Tanner Houck's going to be back on Monday, but there's a chance that James Paxton has 2 starts, 1 at the Astros and 1 at home against the Dodgers. Your thoughts?
Yeah, I would lean yes on him. He hasn't been quite as good lately, but he hasn't been getting knocked around either, like we've seen for pitchers like Jesus Luzardo. Mostly just the starts have been on the shorter side. I know these are 2 tough matchups, but I still lean yes on James Paxton.
Bailey Ober has a 6.63 ERA over his last 4 starts, and next week he's at the Brewers and home against the Rangers.
Also hasn't been as sharp lately, and in Ober's case, he is well over his previous high in innings, so you could understand why things might unravel for him to close out the season. But I think there have been enough good starts recently amid the bad ones that I'll stick with him for 2 starts.
Bryce Elder has a 6.37 ERA over his last 7 starts, and he is facing the Mets and at the Giants.
Yeah. It was a rough stretch prior to a bounce back start last time out. And even if he pitches well, it's probably going to be with a low number of strikeouts. So do you want to take the ERA and whip risk in a roto league, even without the strikeout upside? I don't think I would. I'm going to leave Bryce Elder for points leagues this week.
All right, let's slide over to the 2-star pitchers that we can add and stream for next week. Who are they?
So I'm pretty much only recommending this group for points leagues. Of course, if you're chasing wins and strikeouts specifically, you might consider them in a roto league, but they're not a particularly high upside group. They include Zack Gelof, who's pitched well for the Rays, and his matchups this week, both home against the Rockies, against the Yankees. Those are good matchups. Graham Ashcraft has pitched very well of late, but in a way that I don't really buy, and I think it could all fall apart spectacularly. Matchups this week are pretty tough at the Angels, at the Diamondbacks. But if you're looking to maximize volume in a points league, Ashcraft is going to be one of your better options this week. Jose Urquidy looked very good in his last start. He gets the Red Sox, who have kind of struggled of late, and then he's at the Tigers. Very good matchup there. Paul Blackburn of the A's. Can't expect him to get much run support. Wins, that might be tough. But his matchups this week against the Royals and at the White Sox, and also he's just had his share of good starts this year. Has actually been pretty effective. So Paul Blackburn, not a bad choice for points leagues. Mike Clevinger, this is the biggest risk of all. His last 2 starts were good, but it's not like he was missing bats the way we saw retro Mike Clevinger do. I'm pretty skeptical of it, but his matchups are against the Mariners and against the A's. It's pretty favorable. If you're feeling lucky, Mike Clevinger might be an okay choice.
I do want to get to sleeper hitters, so I'll quickly run through your single start streamers for next week. You've got Cole Reagans at the Oakland A's, Chase Silseth at the Mets, Seth Lugo at home against the Marlins, Kyle Hendricks at the Pirates, and Ranger Suarez at home against the Cardinals.
I will just say quickly, those top 3, Reagans, Silseth, and Lugo, I like them more than any of the 2 start sleepers we just went over.
The best hitter matchups for next week, the Oakland A's, followed by the Pirates, Cubs, Mariners, and Nationals. The worst hitter matchups, Brewers, Giants, Twins, Red Sox, and the Padres. With that being said, Scott, your sleeper hitters for next week, starting with someone we talk a lot about.
Zack Gelof, yeah. Clearly he hasn't slowed down yet. I'm still skeptical he can sustain close to this level of production. But there are some pretty good underlying indicators too, amid some discouraging ones. And his matchups this week, A's have the most favorable one. So why would you sit him I cannot recommend sitting him this week. Zack Gelof. Next two here on the list, Marcell Ozuna, Chas McCormick. It's really more of a case of, okay, their team's matchups aren't bad, and they've been so good for so long. It's a wonder they even qualify for this list, but they do. So Ozuna and McCormick, good starts. Josh Bell's looked good since being acquired from the Marlins. So has Jake Berger. Their matchups are pretty good this week. You mentioned the Nationals have the 5th best hitter matchups. Keibert Ruiz, who has been a rising star at catcher lately, I would say, and is still available in 40% of CBS sports leagues. And also Joey Meneses has been hot. I think they make for fine plays from the Nationals lineup. I'll mention one more here, Brian Hayes of the Pirates, who's been swinging a hot bat of late. They have the 2nd best hitter matchups, as you mentioned, Frank, and 4 of them are against lefties. 4 of their 7 games are against lefties. Brian Hayes' numbers are especially good against them. Just one last quick point, because I know we've talked a lot about Spencer Torkelson and Kerry Carpenter lately. I like them both, generally speaking, but they have a full week of home games, and that's actually an issue for players on the Tigers. If you look at those 2 players, home away splits, Torkelson and Carpenter. I'm not saying they're must sit, but if you do have alternatives, it's a week to consider them, as hot as they've been.
All right. For more extensive fantasy baseball coverage, listen to the Fantasy Baseball Today podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, the Audacy app, or anywhere else podcasts are found. Thanks for listening to Fantasy Baseball Today in 5, and we'll be back again tomorrow. Bye-bye.